What if I told you there's a single key that could supposedly unlock the entire story of the Bible? Well, today we're jumping in a time machine and heading back to 1895 to look at a text that claims to have found that exact key. Let's get started. Okay, so our guide for this whole thing is a set of Bible lessons from way back in the late 1800s. And the absolute center of their teaching is this structure you see here, the ancient Israelite sanctuary. Now, according to them, this thing isn't just some dusty historical artifact. No, they saw it as a living blueprint, like a map to a really deep divine mystery.
You know, the authors of these lessons actually quoted one of their early pioneers to describe this whole idea. He called it a golden thread that runs all through the Bible. I love that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to grab onto that golden thread and just follow it. Let's see where this 19th century thinking really takes us.
All right, first stop on our journey. We're starting with the real physical thing, the sanctuary they actually built out there in the desert. The source text frames this as like the basic blueprint, the shadow that's supposed to help us grasp the real deal. So, first things first, what even is a sanctuary? The 1895 lessons keep it pretty simple. They pull a definition from both the Bible and a dictionary from their time, and it boils down to this. It was a holy place, a sacred spot, specifically designed to be a dwelling place for God. Basically, it was a direct line, a point of contact between heaven and earth. And here's where it gets really interesting, because this wasn't just some random tent. It was designed with incredible precision. You can see the layout here. It had three main parts. First, you've got the courtyard outside. That's where the sacrifices and cleansing happened. Then you step inside to the first room, the holy place. Priests were in there every single day doing their thing. But then there was the second room, the most holy place. This was the heart of it all, with the Ark of the Covenant inside. It was considered the place where God's presence literally was. And get this, they could only go in there once a year, just once.
Okay, so here's the absolute core argument from our 1895 source. All of it, the building, the fancy furniture, all the daily rituals, that wasn't the point. It was all just a giant object lesson, a meticulously crafted scale model that was pointing to something way, way bigger. Which leads to the big question, right? If this whole complicated setup on Earth was just a shadow, a copy, then what was it a copy of? What's the original? Well, this is the exact moment that our golden thread starts to pull us up from Earth and points us toward heaven. And that brings us to the next major piece of the puzzle. This is the big reveal in the source text, the idea that there's a real sanctuary, an original one up in heaven, and the one on Earth, it was just a knockoff, a replica. And this chart just lays out the difference so clearly. Think about it. On one hand, you have the earthly model. It was temporary. It was run by priests who, eventually die, and it operated on the blood of animals. But on the other hand, you have the heavenly reality. The 1895 text says this one is perfect, it's eternal, and its high priest is Christ himself, who offered his own blood, just one time for everyone. And the lessons are super clear about this. Their argument is that Christ's work as a priest didn't happen on earth. It started after he ascended to heaven. And his ministry isn't in some copy, it's in the real thing, the true tabernacle in heaven. Okay, this is where we get to the grand finale of the whole sanctuary service. Because just like that earthly tent had a big once-a-year event, the source argues the heavenly one does too. And they call this work the final atonement. Yeah. In the old Hebrew calendar, there was this one day that was more solemn, more important than any other, the Day of Atonement. It was all about judgment and cleansing. And for the folks writing our source text, this ancient ceremony was everything. It was the key to understanding what they believed is the final stage of Christ's work. So here's a quick rundown of how it went down. On that one specific day, the high priest would walk past the veil into the most holy place, into the very presence of God. He'd bring the blood from a sacrifice, and that blood was seen as satisfying the demands of the law, which was right there in the Ark of the Covenant. This whole ritual was a symbol. It symbolically cleansed the sanctuary from all the sins that had been sort of recorded there all year. And after that, the sins were taken away from the people for good.
And here it is. This is the crucial connection that the 1895 lessons make. They basically say, just like the earthly sanctuary got cleansed of its record of sins, the heavenly sanctuary also has to be cleansed. And they see this cleansing as a final work of judgment, an investigation, if you will. So naturally, you have to ask, if this heavenly cleansing, this final judgment is a real thing that's supposed to happen, when? Does the Bible give a start date? Well, this question is what takes the whole idea from just theology and drops it right into the world of prophecy. And according to our 1895 source, the answer is a resounding yes. All right, we're in the home stretch now, and this is where we get to the most specific, and frankly, the most controversial part of this whole teaching. We're talking about a specific Bible prophecy that these 19th century authors believed pointed to the exact year this heavenly judgment kicked off. The whole timeline hinges on this one verse from the book of Daniel. You've got two parts, a time period, 2,300 days, and an event, the cleansing of the sanctuary. For those believers back in the 1800s, putting those two pieces together, well, that was the whole ballgame. So how in the world did they get a specific date out of that? It's pretty fascinating, and the steps of their calculation are right here. First, they use what's called the day for a year principle, which is common when interpreting these kinds of prophecies. So 2,300 days becomes 2,300 times years. Simple enough? Next, they needed a starting point. They found that in a related prophecy, which gave them the year 457 BC. Okay, then they saw that the first chunk of that timeline, 490 years, was cut off for the Jewish people, and that part ended in AD 34. So you take 490 away from 2,300, and you're left with 1,810 years. The last step? Add those 1,810 years to AD 34, and you land on one very specific, very important year, 1844. That's the year. According to the logic laid out in this 1895 text, this wasn't just some random date they pulled out of a hat. No. To them, this was the biblically prophesied year that Christ's ministry shifted. He moved from the holy place to the most holy place in that heavenly sanctuary and officially began the final work of judgment. So, let's just quickly retrace that golden thread one last time to see the whole picture. It starts with an earthly building that's just a pattern. That pattern points to a real sanctuary up in heaven. Christ is the high priest in that heavenly one. The ancient Day of Atonement was a model for a final judgment, and a very specific prophecy points to the year 1844 as the day that judgment began. And that, right there, is the grand conclusion of the whole thing. The people who wrote these lessons back in 1895 truly believed, and they taught, that the final judgment wasn't some far-off future event. They believed it had already started, and it was happening in heaven right then as they were living and breathing. Which leaves us with a pretty big thought to chew on. If you take this 19th century text at its word, it means a cosmic judgment has been going on for over 180 years. So the question is, what would it actually mean to live your life in that reality?